Hello everyone and welcome back. Today I'm going to review Billy Summers by Stephen King. Billy Summers is a killer for hire. Among the best snipers in the world, he has a talent for melting away once the job is done. But he'll only take the hit if he can be convinced that the guy in question is the bad guy. But now Billy wants out, and he is convinced to take one last job. Undercover and waiting for months, Billy begins writing, looking back at his time in the army. This should be an easy job, so what could possibly go wrong? Before I get into the actual review, I know content warnings for Stephen King have been discussed quite in depth and I have been asked about it in the past, and my general response is assume anything can be in a Stephen King book, but this time round I specifically want to point out that there are some quite detailed anatomical descriptions of the aftermath of rape. At the moment, I feel like Stephen King is on something of a hard crime thriller kick, because his last few books have definitely been more focused on that than the paranormal, and Billy Summers is no different. It is very contemporary and there is a teeny bit in the corner, very tiny bit of paranormal-ish stuff if you look really carefully. What struck me, as with other Stephen King books, is the character creation is just so effortless. The cast is created just so quickly. Every time we meet a new person, they are built up and become a person so quickly on the page. Billy himself is a very interesting character. He is a killer for hire and has a very intriguing moral compass. He'll kill, but he has to be convinced that the person he's killing really does deserve it. Throughout the book we watch him peel away his experiences over the years until we get down and discover how he has ended up how he is. We really get to the core of Billy Summers and we really learn so much about him. We do have quite the cast of characters. There are one or two like bad guys for the sake of being bad guys, but that is typical for a Stephen King book, especially if the focus isn't on them. But everyone feels really solidly placed in this world. The relationships are also built really quite naturally. There are a lot of friendships and connections being formed around Billy, and it feels like they're given the space to form as they need to be. Some of the relationships have history, and it does feel like there are years and years of experience behind where we are today. The relationship and friendship with the trust that builds up in the second half of the book, I feel, is one of Stephen King's strongest built relationships. And I don't know if this is a spoiler, but the character in question in the second half of the book, I mean, they've been very careful to keep her name out of the synopsis. I have so many questions and I would really love to know what else goes on. The pacing is really quite interesting in this book. The start is extremely slow. If you've read any of King's chunky books, you know how slow paced we can be when we start getting situated in the world and meeting our main characters, and this is really no different. There is a lot of time spent just placing everything and forming everything. Billy does have to become part of the scenery where he's placed undercover, and there is a lot of time spent settling in. Then we start ramping up to what would almost be the climax in any other book before we pull back and start really what is someone else's story. It does work though, and the second half can be really quite intense, and we need these quieter times to pull back and have some breathing space and just process the events. The second half does feel quite different to the first half, and there's many authors where this would be book 2. There are also a lot of extended flashback scenes throughout this book, so we almost have 3 stories here. King really does examine combat experience and how it can affect you, and how coming home may not be the easy thing that is expected, and there is an acknowledgement to a lot of help from Bing West at the back of the book. And the combat scenes just feel so visceral and gritty and real, and they really do grab you with their horror of the moment. If you are a big reader of King, you know about his habit of foreshadowing, and this book is no different, although some of the foreshadowing involved Little did they know that in a year's time everyone would be locked down at home when there's characters in hiding. And did this this is a personal thing, but do we need this at this point yet? Also, there are quite a lot of digs about a certain previous US president who in the timeline of this book would still be the president, who actually has zero to do with this book at all. Despite the shift from the paranormal to the crime suspense thriller, there are still touches of the king that you are familiar with. There are gory and disturbing scenes, in some revenge scenes for the sake of just being gory and shocking, I think, and I will never look at egg beaters the same way. One of the things I do get asked when I review a new Stephen King book is, how's the ending? And without giving away any details, this is a good one. This was actually one of his more solid endings, and overall I did notice how tighter the writing is at the moment. Stephen King, let's face it, meanders and goes on, and we'll have a couple of chapters of this character who then dies a horrible death and has nothing to do with the story, but we've built them up and had stories about them, and everything in this one just feels like it's a little bit more controlled. And so I thought the writing was just really that bit tighter. Meandering does still happen, but it is contained and relevant. But overall, it was so easy to fall into this world, and I was swept up in Billy's story. This is style is typical King. If you have read a lot of Stephen King, you know the style of the book you're going to get, and this was no different, and I really enjoyed it. So if you have read this or any other King, I would love to know your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I shall see you all soon.